And it definitely feels like a very timely topic. For communicators, crisis has always been about preparation, judgment, and speed. But AI is really changing the environment around us. Issues can emerge faster, misinformation can spread further, and stakeholder expectations are definitely higher than they've ever been. But at the same time, AI is giving us new tools to listen better, spot risks earlier, stress test scenarios, and support teams under pressure. So today's conversation is really about the kind of practical reality of all that. Not AI as a shiny new tool, but how can it actually help businesses become more resilient? And where do we still need human judgment and governance and experience at the center of it all? So we have an absolutely brilliant panel joining us today, bringing perspectives from, crisis and insights and technology. And I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves first. So Carly, over to you.
Thank you, Laura. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this session. My name is Carly Sakis. I'm the Chief Insights Officer at Karma. I'm also an AMAC Board Director. I'm here today to talk from a measurement, analytics, and evaluation standpoint. So to offer some guidance, but also what we're seeing in terms of how AI is helping in a crisis, helping to navigate those challenges that you've highlighted, Laura.
Brilliant. Prashant?
Hi, my name is Prashant. I'm the co-founder and CEO of N37 Labs. We are a modern AI innovation lab. We have built an operating system with AI for the PR and comms industry. I'm here to basically see how we can learn from everybody here on the panel and really build very modern frontier systems that can help navigate crisis for enterprises. Thanks.
Brilliant. Sikanti?
Thanks, Laura. Hi, everyone. My name's Shukanti. I work as a partner with an advisory firm called ICR. ICR focuses on connecting companies to capital. We've got a great track record over the last 28 years of connecting over 550 companies to the US capital markets. I'm going to be approaching this wearing two hats. One is the hat that I wear at ICR, where I head international strategy and markets. But I'm also going to be wearing a hat, which is what I was wearing in my last role when I was on the client side. And I think you'll find the duality of both fairly interesting.
Awesome. And Chris?
Hi, thanks, Laura. Hi, I'm Chris De Cruz. I'm the Global Head of Innovation, Content, and Crisis Communications at Sandpiper. Sandpiper is a reputation management consultancy. And in my previous role, I was also the head of crisis for Edelman across Southeast Asia.
Brilliant. A great panel. So with that, I'm going to come to all of you with a kind of quick opening thought. So when we talk about deploying AI to crisis-proof your business, what does that even mean in practice for communicators? Shikanti, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, Laura. I think it means a couple of things. One is it means the fact, it's all about how do we embrace the power of change and embrace the power of technology as we look towards the future, and there is no one size that fits all. But the fact is, change is a constant, and AI is upon us. So we can either ride the AI bandwagon or be left behind. There are various ways that we can look at that. I'm sure we'll look at that during the session, but I'll stop there and hand it back to you, Laura.
Yeah. Prashant, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think I would add to what Shukanti just said, is that the PR and comms industry now needs to leverage the power of AI to really understand what's going on across different stakeholders, across different platforms. So what is the AI readiness quotient within enterprises is very important for us to kind of discuss and really see how this industry is going to enhance its capacities and capabilities to combat all the crises that will, be thrust upon this industry. The second is, how do we really create AI forward teams? Because while there is a lot of awareness amongst stakeholders and corporate communication professionals, how do we really ensure that the teams are AI forward? So I think these are two things that we need to really talk about in this conversation.
Sure, I like that. AI forward teams. Carly, what's your view?
It's a nice link actually to my view. I see crisis proofing as quite a dream here. Like if we can crisis proof that, that would be incredible. I think the reality is that issues are emerging quickly, they're scaling quickly, and AI is helping us to meet many of those challenges. For me, it's about the team. We're working with many different partners. When you're planning to crisis proof or going through a crisis, you'll have an ecosystem. Trust in your partners and letting them play to their strengths in that process is absolutely paramount. So making sure that you've got the swim lanes so that people know where they're playing and know where they're supporting you through that crisis and where AI is being used and trusted. So if we've got a lot of agency experts on the call, if you're working with an analytics partner, your understanding of their AI systems is absolutely crucial if it's all going to come together to support the end client.
For sure. So, Chris, what's your view?
My view is first understanding when it comes to crisis proofing your business, and I'm not just looking at our industry, but any industry. Uh, we saw what happened when Fable 5 suddenly got taken out of everyone's access. So I don't think we all understand, CEOs included, that their own dependencies in their own value chain, and it's got to start with there. So before I think we get to AI forward teams, I think we need to put in a system to understand AI at the pace it's going. Because what happens today is a very different picture from 2 weeks from now. Yeah.
I think that we'll get into the first question then, and I think Shukanti, I might come to you just based on what Chris was just saying. It's like, so as comms people, how can we be advising the business in the C-suite on kind of AI resilience and reputation management? If we have to start there and get everyone behind it, where do we start?
So, in the first couple of comments made by my colleagues on the panel, I think, there are two aspects that have come through. And I think it's worthwhile just to think about both of them separately, but together. The first is obviously what Prashant talked about, which was looking at things that are more inward looking at the communications industry per se. And what Chris talked about, or Christopher talked about, which was how do we advise clients? And if you look at our roles, it's interesting because we sit at the crossroads of both. And as Carly said, it's all about measurement at the end of the day. But the fact is that if you really look at our roles when we're advising our chief executives or advising client chief executives, I think there are two or three things that very clearly need to be established. The first is, the fact that this is a change that is there upon us. It is an incredibly fast-paced change. And it's a change that is evolving, faster than we can perhaps say evolving. And therefore, there is no one size fits all. I'm going back to that. There is, no amount of training that well, training is important, but there's no amount of training that can really fully encapsulate what you can do with AI. And therefore, if you look at use cases, the use cases will have to emerge company by company, industry by industry. But the fact is, it is upon us. Some of the ways organizations are looking at this is, they include the fact that they are looking at existing workflows, things that are being, repeated multiple times over. Is there a more efficient way to look at it? Sourcing, is there a more efficient way to look at sourcing? If you're looking at building out scenarios and scenario planning, is there a way to look at scenarios through AI using machine learning? There are risks that are emerging on the horizon, both endemic to a business, across competition, across geopolitical risks. Is there a way to look at that through AI and machine learning? So a lot of those baselines will have to be established by company, by industry, because they will vary, and the use cases will emerge from within. I was talking to a gentleman yesterday who actually turned around and said, the most beautiful thing possible, ask the governance keepers to set the guardrails and step out of the way. Because the way people will learn is if they play with the AI and make it their own.
Love that. So thinking just based on what Shiganti's saying, Chris, as we think about kind of, you've obviously got a huge amount of experience in this area, but what are you seeing right now where AI is making the biggest or practical difference in how people are preparing? What are you seeing on the ground, Ryan?
Okay, so I'm going to divide this into two. Those who are using AI via its low-hanging fruits, for example, get a statement out in 2 seconds versus 2 hours, uh, versus those who really understand how AI works and are starting to use it like a thinking partner. I love what Sukanti talked about. Well, I do understand the point about having the guardrails, and we need the guardrails to be loosened up so we can sandbox. I think it's already there. We are not even using it to the point where we hit the guardrails. And when I say we, I'm saying the general 95% of AI users today. It's not anyone's fault. It's just everything's moving so quickly. I don't know what I don't know. So the low-hanging fruits, when you move up that value chain of resource needed for content, and if you start using, I've been doing crisis for about 11 to 12 years specifically, and after hour 6, you get tired. The decision makers get tired. Your computers do not get tired with the sort of agentic capability a general user has access to today. Your computer will run at 3 times your capacity while you're asleep. And the governance around that, I may be jumping the gun here around AI versus human. No, you make the AI do the work, do the thinking, rubbish in, rubbish out, but the human is at the final guardrail. Your name is at the output. So I think it's almost the greatest tool and the greatest thinking partner in existence in our lifetimes, but we've not really gotten to the point of, wow, while I go to sleep, 3 of my brains are working or could be working for me.
Yeah, there's a long way to go. But I guess, Prashant, thinking about from a technology point of view, then, what should businesses be thinking about in terms of what they should have in board? And, they want AI to be genuinely useful. What is the technology out there that they should be thinking about?
Yeah, I think businesses need to think of a AI readiness platform that kind of ingests all the intelligence that Shukanti just spoke about. So policy intelligence, regulatory intelligence, media intelligence, social media intelligence, all into one platform. So that's the C-suite, the corporate comms teams, the brand teams, all have access to one unified console, which can give them that layer. It is supported by AI-ready teams with a matrix of, integrating with different functions. So you need to be able to integrate with HR, IT, and, keep all stakeholders aligned on what messaging. We've had a very interesting use case with a US-based PR firm, and they said, we want our platform to ensure that the governance and protocols are the base layer for the application. And on top of that, everything else will kind of rest. So again, to Christopher's point, agentic AI is going to come in ways that the PR and comms industry has not yet completely played out how it is going to affect the workflows. But we can see that agentic AI systems could, completely go berserk. There has to be a system, there has to be a guardrail and a playbook that is designed to ensure that we are able to govern what these bad actors are out there and what they're really doing in the market and how it is affecting stakeholders and what do we really need to ensure that we are able to keep a very authentic and credible voice with the audiences that we want to really engage with.
And how technical are these platforms? Are they just like in terms of a user needing to understand technology? Like I assume that they're kind of moving toward a place to be kind of quite easy to use, versus like needing to get your IT team involved to do it, right?
Absolutely. There going to be systems like how you currently use your Claude or GPT. It's going to be as user friendly as that. You can just talk to the system and it can give you the relevant inferences.
Yeah. I think we'll get to governance, but I guess Carly, just as we think about kind of insights and monitoring, which is such a critical part of all of this, how can AI help organizations spot reputational risks earlier and before they do become a full-blown crisis? And I know I'm talking to clients about kind of more early warning systems and things like this at the minute, and that feels like it's going. Tell us more about what you're seeing there.
You're right. We're seeing a huge trend. The focus, the time, the energy is going from many comms teams globally, regionally, heading to those early detection systems. And I think that that's really a very, very important part of where AI can offer some speed, some scale, and some accurate classification on that. Some of the best examples I'm seeing at the moment, and this is, I'm aware that many of the teams, Shell, for example, have put in agentic AI to triage emerging issues so that the agents are actually doing that triaging work. I know that that's where many of the players are now. Where we're seeing really great success for the masses is social listening with a layer of AI on top of it. So we're looking at capturing those emerging things that are off our radar, that aren't at the forefront of our day, but saying, look, did you see this? This is scaling. The velocity of this narrative is going very, very high. You need to have a look at this. The other thing, Laura, and I think that this environment and the environment of crisis at this point, I don't know whether you're seeing it from your point of view, but our clients are looking at, say, 400 issues instead of 4. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, on our radar would be, 4 key areas of risk. Right now, we have no idea whether a small issue will become a big issue. The risk is ever present given social media virality, those things. So we're having to scan a whole lot more than we used to, and we get that risk of being surprised is there despite the speed and efficiency of AI as well.
No, I think that's a definite point. I guess, Chris, if we think about, I guess, the speed and the more things that are happening, but let's talk a bit more about the judgment needed then as this is happening. It's like, how can comms team use AI to move faster without losing that kind of human oversight? And if Chris, you've got a view on that.
I think that can be done pretty easily. I'll go back to my point about using partnering with your AI to ensure that you understand how it's built. It's built mapped to the way our brains are built. So if you understand that, and we ensure that we have cognitive discipline and ensure that we are utilizing it to its full capability, but at the final gate, you've got a human saying yes, no, this goes to the client, this goes to the desk of the CEO or not. And that really is not very different from how the entire industry has been working already. At a law firm, a senior partner has to put his name when something goes out. So I think nothing changes. It's the machinery that happens before that final decision is made has drastically improved.
We still need to keep the same rules. I guess, to Kathy, based on what Carly was just saying, like, what are you seeing with clients around just this huge exponential amount of issues we're now facing? How are clients handling that?
So it's a great question, Laura. And to be honest, to Carly's point, this isn't something new. We've seen companies do this with various degrees of sophistication for the last 10 years, right? Because if you really look at a lot of issues that have emerged over the last 10 years, and you look at the sources of those issues, you realize that there are sets of bad actors. And at times, those bad actors could be acting on the behest of, various vested interests. But if you look at, the soft drinks industry, if you look at mining and natural resources, if you look at pharmaceuticals, they've all been subjected to attacks that have been the result of misinformation or disinformation campaigns or vested interests, where you find, social activist groups actually, raising their wings and coming and attacking particular companies, resulting in demonstrations, resulting in even loss of work days or loss of life. And a lot of organizations, therefore, have actually trained or are looking to train their AI systems on what has happened in the last 5 years, on those instances that have happened in the last 5 years. It's pointless bringing to the management team, an issue when you've already got 10,000 people at the gate. But if you've mapped the last 5 years and the last 10 years of issues that have happened and what has been the murmur, on the social media, murmur on the dark web, murmurs otherwise, you start to detect A, develop a baseline, and B, you start to develop a traffic light system that informs you on whether or not something is just, a blip or the actual beginning of a disorganized or an organized movement to actually, cause social unrest. And those are information reports that are being fed into, forward-looking, tech-forward, AI-forward management teams, who are then acting ahead of time, knowing that there is an attack or unrest that is brewing. But the only thing that I will say is with such cases, it's a question of machine learning as well. If you don't train your systems on what has happened over the last, 5 or 10 years, your machines are not going to be, the AI is not going to be sufficiently trained to be able to detect what's happening now. But if you look at, the proliferation of firms that are looking at misinformation today and trying to address it, it could be in elections, it could be around any of these industries. There are a number of firms that are specialized with people who've come out of national intelligence, right, who are actually doing this as, for a living.
Yeah, the world has moved on. I guess, Prashant, if we think about this, like it all comes down to having these tools available to be able to do it. What are the kind of risks of over relying on these AI tools, and how, we talked earlier about guardrails, like how do you go about building the right guardrails?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And thanks, Shukanti, for those inputs, because as we build these systems, I think the form factor is such that we built it as a human reinforcement loop. So humans are actually at the center of everything. So you can give the AI and the machine all the background of the client, the scenarios that Shukanti spoke about, get it trained on that data. But there has to be somebody in the AI forward team who understands data engineering, analytics, and is able to give that in a very precise manner to the teams internally to align and then respond to crisis. So in the systems that are going to be built currently and in the future, you're going to see a lot of AI-backed data engineers in the comms team, and they will be doing a lot of what Sukanti just spoke about. And they will be coordinating with the corporate communications team, the agency people, and the brand and the other C-suite. So that's one way to ensure that the guardrails are in place. And all the internal agents, and when I say agents, that is within the AI system itself, you will have an agent to do the writing, you'll have an agent to do the media engagement. All these agents will be guardrailed with the governance and ethics that every enterprise has in place. So it will be customized for every enterprise. And the human in the loop will approve or disapprove. So nothing will go out. So as Christopher said, that it is the same system we're talking about. It's just that AI is getting you to a place where there's so much of misinformation and disinformation in the market that you're able to map it much quicker. You're then able to assimilate and then respond. So, so that's probably the role of AI in this entire piece.
Absolutely. So, Carly, as we think about kind of, I think Shukanti mentioned sort of the misinformation within these systems. As we're thinking about that and, sentiment and narrative tracking, how should teams be thinking about all of those like things in an AI enabled environment? Does it change things, or?
Those things have always been important for teams to track. One thing I think that Prashant mentioned is that you should really never go into another crisis without your data scientist. And I've learned that over the last few years as we've been helping clients through some massive media issues, is that the experts that you need have actually changed. So you need different people in your support squad. Have them have trust in them, and they can really, really help you. In terms of AI enablement here, what I'm really liking about things like sentiment and narrative tracking in a crisis is that we can track live. That a few years ago wasn't so accurate if it was possible. So now it is possible, and I personally have loved the accuracy. So you can test in a multi-dimensional issue. You can track not just a 3-point sentiment, but actual sentiment point of view of every player in that issue. So multi-level sentiment, narrative drift as well. So the narrative, the dominant narrative might be what is the velocity of that countermeasure? How is that tracking and drifting over time? That's something that we couldn't do 5 years ago, real time with a high level of accuracy. Now we can. I think one thing here too, Laura, is it's great to have those things being prepared and going into a crisis. Benchmarking is important. But I think Christopher was the one that mentioned sleep is important as well. Humans need to sleep. AI doesn't need to. The human logistics of a crisis need to be factored in when we're working in an AI environment too. So we're finding that as soon as a very, very big issue breaks, you're not near your laptop. You are quite often only have your mobile phone and you are in a separate media center, or you're on the phone to journalists. You are not traditionally at your desk able to go onto your desktop and report as you would in everyday circumstances. So we're seeing a massive trend to big command center walls. So a renaissance of the command center coming in so that it's visible through multifunctions. They can see emerging issues and track it live in the room. We're also seeing that the teams that acknowledge the logistics of a crisis and know that they need to have WhatsApp access, those narratives need to come through on WhatsApp or the command center. Have a think about the logistics of where your team will actually be sitting and how data is going to get to them, because I guarantee you that has caught out many teams in the past.
Yeah, I can imagine. I like that renaissance of the command center. Sounds quite sci-fi, doesn't it? Chris, as we think about, like, I guess maybe when things don't go well, like, what are the common mistakes organizations are making when bringing AI in? Where does it go wrong?
First is using AI for the first time during a crisis. It's like, I say the same thing for putting together crisis preparedness manuals and simulations. You can't install a fire suppression system when the building's on fire. It just doesn't work. And you'll end up blaming the AI for something that it's really not its fault. So it's really ensuring that AI systems, or you're generally up to date with AI systems, and you know how it can be used in a crisis in its various forms, from the most base level to a more cognitive level. Number two is using AI as your first draft. Your AI should not be your first thought draft partner. It can be your first written partner, but even then, there is a study that says consumers are already finding AI style writing a turn off in marketing. So we really got to change that, or we really got to work really hard on making our machine deconstruct the way it writes, because it's one of the hardest things to do with the machine. So using it as your first draft and your last draft is a big no-no. And I see a lot of clients, you know what? It's not just clients, it's even consultants have the habit of using AI as a first thought draft. And if you use it as a first thought and writing draft, you're just, is it truly your thought? So really, how do we use it, and how do we consciously use the AI to ensure that we are not subcontracting our own thought, because that's what clients pay us for. So I
Yeah.
think those were the two, and the third would be really not using. Look, everyone is in AI. Everyone wants to understand AI, and we can't fault anyone for not understanding something that's moving at this speed. But if someone were to ask me what's the single greatest current value of AI, and how we should use it is pattern recognition. I think everyone in this panel uses it to a certain degree for pattern recognition. And the closer we get to that and get people to understand what that means, because pattern recognition can mean anything, yeah, not just in a crisis.
Mm.
Uh, and I think it's just a flip of an understanding to also ensure that the mistake I see is companies and organizations and individuals thinking it's not accessible. To me, it's the really the latest and greatest equalizer. I think companies need to understand that.
Mm. For sure. So I guess we're talking about kind of like how we use it. I guess Akanthi, you're kind of in this a global role. How, often we're going at these big global crises and issues. How does AI work with cultural, like local market nuance and cultural stakeholders and languages and all that stuff?
No, thanks, Laura. And I think, just to bridge what a couple of our colleagues were
Mm.
saying earlier, the fact is, if you look at the narrative, right, you cannot substitute local market knowledge and local nuance for something that's uniform and works across, right? It needs to be embedded in market nuance, in human understanding. There's no substitute for that. What is interesting is in today's day and age, and this is happening, there are firms and there are people and there are practices wherein you're actually using AI to be the bad cop, right? And therefore testing your message in crisis scenarios, in scenarios that are likely to be thorny, a bad result, reporting, an annual report, reporting a bad, a difficult analyst call, where you
Mm.
get, you know, people to create literally, and this is happening again, digital twins of certain organizations, certain people, and message testing your narrative to ensure that, it goes down well or it sits at a comfortable level. It's also interesting because from a practitioner point of view, if you are a communications professional sitting in a large organization, you basically want to make sure that you're asking all the difficult questions, but you don't want to be seen as the harbinger of bad news to management. It's always fine to say, we've done these scenarios through AI. These are the questions that we think you should be prepared for. And you've built that bit of breathing space for yourself when you're taking the difficult questions to your management. But it's not only a question of taking the difficult questions to the management, it's a question of providing solutions. And that's where,
Right.
The testing of the narrative on digital twins, on people who, are likely to ask those questions, how would they react, becomes very, very interesting.
It does. I'm just we've got a question in. I'm gonna jump to that and see who would like to take it. So thank you, Artie, for the question. And it says, if you had to place one big bet on the AI capability that will most transform crisis communications in the next 2 to 3 years, what would it be? And what should organizations do now to be ready? That's a great question. Anyone that would like to jump in?
Well,
Chris?
I can take a
Oh,
shot.
Prashant. Here you
Yeah.
go.
As I said, that if you're able to build the first AI intelligence platform for your organization and ensure that all that data and that intelligence is being kind of ingested within all the different functions for all the different stakeholders and build that solid foundation layer, like some of my colleagues said, that has it been tested with past data? How did those crises really affect stakeholders in the last 5 years? Can we really model that data and ensure that we are at base level A to kind of prime the C-suite that this is what AI has already done as base level 1. And now whatever we do going forward in terms of our AI readiness will be, the second step in the entire process of making the organization ready for any future crisis. So that's how I would look at building the first application layer.
Chris, do you want to jump on that?
I think the question was the single biggest thing that will transform the AI industry.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, the single biggest thing, which to me is also going to be our single biggest risk,
Hmm.
is agentic AI. Because as agentic AI becomes even better, even more capable, the accountability question is going to be very important because you're going to have agents, allowing agents to do a variety of things. So if used well, if used responsibly, it will transform our industry. It won't replace us. But if we understand it and use it efficiently, I think it will mean the difference between a consultancy that survives and one that really doesn't thrive in the next generation.
Yeah, but I think specifically around how will agents then affect how we do crisis comms? Is there a place that we get to where it's all automated through agents, or is it that are we like donkey's years away from that?
We're not. We can do it. We can do it today. We can do it in a week. It's first understanding where your dependencies are on AI as an organization, because that's going to feed directly into the crisis communications portion. Number two is, I mean, we could build a system that gets you to all decision making, all scenario mapping, all content created, all stakeholders informed. We could get that with
Hmm.
one person having oversight. Yeah, we could potentially. Philosophically, yes. Realistically, no.
Hmm.
I think one of the other panelists mentioned about how do we look at first ensuring we understand our workflows and where we use AI in our workflows. So if you look at your current crisis workflow, it's like the Kali pointed out, early signal detection,
Mm.
and as Prashant pointed out, building that first layer.
Yeah, I would like to also add out here is that agentic AI systems could also pose the biggest threat in the crisis comm sector. And every firm and enterprise needs to have a playbook to actually
Mm.
combat that in the future. And that's not really far away. So we need to think of that also, as Christopher said.
Mm.
Um, so there will be teams that will be devoted only to combat agentic AI bad actors.
Interesting stuff. So another question. When we think about issues as a whole, and how where AI can play a role in issues, are there some issues that AI is more helpful in, or is AI a bit issue agnostic? So I don't know, like a cyber threat versus a reputation threat or whatever. Is there any thoughts on where AI can be more useful or not, or is it an even field?
I think the problem with AI, can I take that first?
Sure.
So, so
I
before
think
before we go
the,
there,
the
sorry,
Mm.
Christopher.
no problem. Go ahead.
There is one element about the previous question that I'd like to interject and just share with everyone. It leads on what my colleague said, but I think it's important to mention, right? So sorry about interrupting, but the fact is, if you look at the entire debate around sovereign AI,
Mhm.
and data, it is extremely important and relevant. And if you look at companies like Anthropic and where they started, it was all about AI for good. If you look at Google DeepMind, they talk about AI for good because ultimately you're letting loose. And if you look at the books that have been written around, AI and AI for good and where it could overstep, they're pretty scary, right? Because we're
Mhm.
talking about national level data, sovereign level data being let loose to a set of machines that beyond a point have a mind of their own and beyond a point can actually be smarter than all of us. So I think, if you look at crisis, uh, to Arthi's question, beyond an individual company or an individual industry, there is a significant need to build national level, sovereign level governance, right? So that we are not thoroughly confused at the end of it. I'll give you a very real example and I'll back off immediately after that. And that is, if you look at a lot of the crises that are geopolitical crises that are being fought at this point in time, frankly speaking, nobody has a clue reading the news what's true and what isn't. So if you look at it, I think it's left a lot of us asking for what is the truth, and you realize that it's various shades of gray, right? It isn't black and white anymore. So if you're really thinking about investment and where, organizations or countries should perhaps invest, or across, markets and planets, and, we should be investing, it's around building this, this framework of AI for good, or AI and governance, which transcends individual companies, individual crises, individual industries and countries, but will it affect all of us going forward? Sorry, just wanted to interject and make that point.
I don't know, Prashant, you have a view on that?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with Shukanti. We had some discussions earlier, and the way to look at it is that AI for good also needs to serve every enterprise for good also. So we need to model it according to every enterprise and their proprietary knowledge. And it should not be left to the Anthropics and the Googles of the world to dominate your enterprise data. And I think as long as you can build your own data sovereignty and enterprise proprietary model, which is the thesis that we have, is that APMs and small language models are going to be the future, and open source AI. Which again leads into AI for good, because that's what the larger humanity will really want to work with compared to private large language models. Yeah.
Any other thoughts on that? We go to the next one. I guess, Sukhanti, a question back to you is, obviously you're saying the kind of governance and frameworks need to be built. Where does that begin? Is that on the organization's head, or do you think it will need to be government led?
So I'm going to bring it back to communications professionals, and I think if you really look at it in the microcosm of a company, right? I think communications professionals are suitably placed, very well placed to be AI champions. And I'm going to turn everyone's attention back to when it's fascinating, but we live in an interesting time. We're living through a generation where there was no internet, right? Of course, some of us on the call, like me, remember that. Others don't. But there was a point in time when we didn't have the internet, we didn't have social media. We've survived. We survived all of those and Y2K and all kinds of bugs, and we will survive this as well. But the fact is, if you look at communications professionals, we're very well placed in organizations to work with management, work with the technology team, work with business to be the convener and to frame these governance frameworks, right? But at the same time, equally flag and be, an evangelist for change. Because if you really think about it, you will find reticence at all levels of an organization, at all age groups, at all levels of sophistication when it comes to technology. And therefore, it needs somebody who can sit, frame those guidelines, evangelize the adoption of AI in organizations while playing by the guard rules and the guardrails that have been set for an organization. And that's where I think, communications professionals are very well placed in organizations to do that role. Sorry, took away from your question, but
no, all good, all good. So just going to turn the corner a little bit. I'd just love to hear a bit around, we often hear the kind of times that AI goes wrong in crisis comms. I'm just wondering, has anyone got any use cases they can share of where it's really helped and really worked? I know you're all working with clients every day, and I know we might not be able to say names, but I just wonder if anyone could talk through a scenario or two to kind of give the audience a bit of view of where it really can make a difference.
I can
Yeah,
offer
Carly?
speak to
Yeah.
that, Laura. And unfortunately, I've had to see clients through a number of crises over the last few years where we've had the power of AI to help navigate. Where it's really useful is where we've got a blend of AI speed, accuracy, and scale, but what that means for the human team, right? So where we're seeing is that early identification of a story and that classification of the risk and severity of that story or that narrative for the organization. We can classify it quickly. So is it a level 1, level 2, level 6? Each
Mm-hmm.
level is then connected to what the team needs to do at each level. So we've got AI classifying, finding, classifying, keeping check of it, and then telling us, okay, at level 3, we need to actually get this group of people in the room to talk about the next steps. Or this issue has now moved from level 6 to level 5. We can actually scale down. That means that we're scaling down the number of reports each hour, the number of people that we need in the room. There's that offline online connect that tells us what we need to actually go and do. So, and that really relates to obviously agencies, crisis teams, strategic council, all of those stakeholders are in that mapping. So we all know what to do, what a level 3 means. I know where I need to be at level 3, and I know what I need to do if that moves to level 4. So that synergy is really, really helping clients not figure it out as they go, but also just really simple classification, really viewing narratives and if they're shifting over time. So I know we've spoken a lot about it today, but just the sheer volume that you can get through and analyze is the single biggest thing I've seen, and the single most helpful thing I've seen. So most of our clients have their top tier media list, their influencer list, spreading that out and saying, well, I can actually give you a global view within 3 minutes. And I can also have a look at what all the LLMs are saying and the citations that are being pulled through those LLMs if you give me a few more minutes. I could never do that. 10 years ago, that wasn't possible. So the scale is real in terms of speed and global reach as well.
Mm-hmm. Any other views on some?
What was the question? Where it's gone wrong before?
Well, no more where it's gone right. I think often we hear about where it goes wrong sometimes, but actually where is AI making the most impact in the use cases you've used or you're doing, and that you've seen with clients?
Scenario mapping, content creation, really, and it's, we in the industry, when we do scenario mapping, three scenarios, 9 scenarios, 8 scenarios. But even then, I think the single most effective way is the fact that you've got non-linear thinking as a thinking partner, and you can almost cuboid scenario mapping rather than traditional linear one. So I think that's, in terms of value for money, that's where, other than the speed and uh the rest of the base stuff, I think that's where the money is. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I
Scenario
would like to
optimization.
add one point, Laura.
Prashant,
Go
go
ahead,
ahead.
Prashant.
Yeah. So one of our clients in Malaysia, they specialize in ESG, and they wanted their teams to kind of spend less work on doing the compilation of, where the clients had certain ESG goals declared, say, in 2025. They wanted to measure the drift that happened during the year. So AI really helped them. So we built systems where it could analyze the drift and give them different levels so that they could go back and advise their clients that, this is where you actually had a mismatch in terms of what you shared with stakeholders and where you didn't fulfill the expectations. So that's where AI could do the matching in terms of all the data which is out there, not just in media, but again in research reports with NGOs, with other stakeholders, and then compile all that together within, 5 to 10 minutes and give them that. So that's another use case to kind of look at.
Interesting. Another example of really speeding things up. Kathy, do you have a point of view here?
I was just going to offer something, completely out of left field. But if you look at companies that are AI forward, that are looking at traditional industries but AI forward, and you look at their valuations today vis-a-vis companies or organizations that are not, you're looking at a phenomenal gap in valuations, primarily because people believe that AI is going to make a very significant difference. So even if you look at extraction of natural resources, right, and you look at organizations that are AI forward, there are companies today that have valuations north of $1 billion when they are pre-revenue and pre-production, but purely on the back of the belief that using AI, they will be far, far more efficient and far more targeted in their ability to locate natural resources and extract natural resources in the most efficient manner. And I think, you can't run away from that. This is a change that's upon us that will change the way organizations do their job. And the valuations they will provide will be significantly different.
So I feel like we've talked a few times or mentioned kind of this AI forwardness, and I guess it sounds like there's probably varying levels of where companies are at. But what are the kind of 2 or 3 things then as communicators we could be thinking about to try and encourage people to go away and ask their bosses and talk to their bosses around what we could be doing? What are the 2 or 3 things we could do to kind of push ourselves to be more AI forward? Carly, I think you're on mute.
For me, Laura, it's about AI solving some pain points, and that really helps the conversation in terms move it forward as benefits, to look at the current pain points in a crisis or for any level of communication and seeing what an ideal scenario is. So starting off with what are our key challenges now, not with we need to be in AI. That sort of generalized statement doesn't really have too much meaning or connection to team members, especially in comms, but to actually map out pain points in crises, but also communications in general, reputation in general, and then seeing the solution, an AI-led solution for that. That's very obviously a very sensible, practical way forward. But I do think this sort of blanket hype over moves to AI, we're past that now. We're really looking at really, I think generative AI has moved down on that hype cycle a lot. We're in that disenchantment zone where agentic AI is at the top of the hype cycle now. So we're really looking at what can and can't be done. So making sure that it speaks to and solves our pain points is number one for me.
Any other viewpoints?
Yes, I think I'll just add to what Kali just said, is that you need to have somebody who understands how to do the data engineering side within comms teams. You need to have someone who can solve design. You need to have somebody who can use it for content and research purposes. So I guess that segmentation needs to be there in an AI forward team. And how does that really align with the different functions within the organization? So you could have AI forward teams with many such AI forward engineers, as we call them, solving different workflow issues within the enterprise and ensuring that all stakeholders are aligned.
Crystal, any view on kind of the one thing that communicators should do as they sort of leave this session?
I think this is more of the way I've been using AI and how I've been advocating the use of AI. If you've got an account, just a consistent account. Uh, I've seen this in practice. No two engines are the same. Even if you're using the same model, the more you sort of work with it and train it, the better your output is. So really utilize the memory function, utilize the project functions, because it really is this Karate Kid, Mr. Miyagi situation. The harder you work with it, you're gonna get the better the thinking partner you're gonna get out of it.
Wax on, wax off. So no, but
Exactly.
but just to round off with a couple of thoughts. I think, as we move from individual AI accounts to enterprise-wide solutions, I think, it's important to look at communications playing the role of the convener of, enterprise-wide AI councils, right? Because to Carly's point, it's important to be able to solve problems, or try and better solutions, but it's not anyone's responsibility to identify and surface all of those. So you need councils within the organization that will tap into various levels, various functions, and surface those, which can then actually be tested. And you won't get answers all the time, and you won't get it on the first go, wax on, wax off. You will find the answers as you continue to practice and continue to do it better. And you will need advocates, you will need evangelists at various levels of the organization that will actually help, embrace adoption and embrace, optimization, but at the same time celebrate successes, right? Because nothing will actually get us to adopt this better than knowing that it's worked, right?
Right.
And learn from each other.
Yes, embrace it and learn it and come together on it, I guess. So we're just getting to the end of time. So I'll just give any more final comments from anyone on the panel before we close off. Go on, Carly, finish us off.
Laura, I do want to call on the word trust here. And when we talk about advocating for AI adoption, for bringing in AI workflows to PR and comms, let's not forget that, yes, this is a tech issue, but is a trust issue too. So especially when crisis, if you're trying to bring AI analytics, AI data, AI analysis to the table within a crisis, you need to go a few steps back and make sure that there's trust in the way that that data has been collected, the relevancy, the accuracy, the analysis, because you won't be able to get the C-suite to listen or make sound decisions unless they trust what they're looking at. And if they're very privy to that there's been a massive transformation, AI transformation, and they suddenly get some information that they need to make a decision on, trust is the ultimate thing that they'll need. And the reason that they can be confident of that AI has been a successful project within the business.
Yeah, I think we could do a whole webinar just on that topic, Carly, potentially. Chris, I saw you come off mute. Do you have I bet you might have a final comment. No, good. Well, everyone, thank you so much. I know we're just getting to time now. I think that was a really useful and great discussion, and some useful reminders in, how AI can be this kind of powerful tool, but it only works when it's paired with clear judgment and strong governance and trust, as we talked about, and I guess this collective human experience as well. So thank you so much for those on the line and your questions, and I hope you've given everyone some practical ideas on things you can take back to your teams and organizations. I know this will also exist on the ICCO website. So with that, I'll say thanks to everyone and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.